I'm Tom Mennier, and you're listening to CVS Podcast. This is the second 5-part series in which Tom and David continue their discussions on matters of theological and cultural concern. A two-way Q&A, Series 2, Part 5. Further questions on the Transcendentals and absurdity as a feature of tyranny.
What do you think might be a candidate for a fifth transcendental property that you think might be common to all beings?
I would be reluctant to add unto what the great scholastics have done in the field of the transcendentals. I think that the essential transcendentals of oneness, the good, and the true cover everything. And as I said earlier about the manifestation of beauty being a natural totality of outcome of the good and the true, pretty much covered it. I mean, I think that justice, but that relates to truth, the Holy Spirit, none of them can be imparted or manifest without its help, so it's implied. I think that I wouldn't add anything, because every aspect of the Trinity and the truly good and the eternal are contained in the simplest first few transcendentals that are laid out. So what would you think? I don't know.
Well, it's kind of a trick question, because there is a fifth one traditionally mentioned, which is very subtle.
Oh.
And it's subtle because it's too obvious. And Aquinas lists it first, and it's being itself. And every being has substance, every being has existence, everything is a something. These transcendentals do not apply exclusively to God. They apply to the dunghill. It's crass to think about that example, but it has being, it's well ordered.
Right.
Now, in this fallen world, nothing is perfectly in harmony because everything's out of whack. As St. Paul said, the whole of creation groans under the sin of our first parents. That's the price we pay for the fall. But the fact is that there is to be found in every creature, no matter how small or vile from our perspective in this fallen world, there is beauty. I like to contemplate that. But the fifth one that I was sort of wondering if you'd come up with was substance or thingness, or what's called in Latin res, but it's hard to talk about that.
Well, actually, no, I'm glad you steered us to that direction, and you're right. It's so obvious that I didn't think of it, but then it's a very good point to bring up, because I think that one of the results of modernist thought is that people are being trained away from actual being. They don't understand what it really means, because there's, this subjective identity thing going on, which is the opposite of being. That's the perfect way to get away from actual being and to get out of touch with your actual being and the center of your consciousness. And without being, losing touch with our being is a disastrous path. And this is not exclusive to the modern age, of course. It's just the fact of growing in this world and accumulating baggage and being desensitized to this or that, or oversensitized to this or that. As we grow older, we tend to lose more and more touch with our being. As Charles Bukowski once said, we're all born geniuses and buried idiots. And, from Scripture, one must be as children to enter the kingdom of heaven. And that's what it means. It doesn't mean to be childish. It means, of course, to be have retained your being, your simple, pure being, to be innocent in that sense, but not ignorant, but innocent and pure. And just as a raggedy little sapling grows into a majestic and beautiful oak tree, this is how we should view the proper development of our soul. We become something majestic and beautiful rather than corrupt and diseased and confused and bitter and any other number of things. And that points to a very serious thing, because this is an inescapable part of being human. It's an inescapable danger that affects every one of us. How do we navigate this life, and how do we conclude it? Where do we want to be on our deathbed? If we don't hold death at the forefront of our consciousness, then we get sucked into this world, and we live day to day, and we wrestle with our baggage in not entirely productive ways. But if we're constantly reminding ourselves that we're here for a short time and fully accept our own mortality as a daily habit, also with that holding on to the faith and the love of God and the realization that this is not all there is. This is why it is so essential to keep faith in the transcendentals, in the metaphysical perception of being. When we lose that, and when entire societies lose that, then we are inevitably going to stray and move into the directions that we see manifesting now. So yeah, being, of course, that's the first thing. God is being.
I am.
I am. So, yeah.
And hell is falling away from being.
Yeah.
Just as it's falling away from love and justice and mercy and goodness and truth. So yeah, it's a powerful one, and it's the be all and end all, and it's of course a controversial topic in philosophical circles, whether being is an attribute or being is the ground of all attributes. It's a controversial topic. But we can know, there are many things we can know with certainty, and one of them is that I am, there's only one subsistent being, and that's the I am, that's God. It's not little old me.
Yeah.
Even though I was a hard solipsist, I thought I was the only mind. I thought I was the disembodied mind, and that this was all illusion.
Yeah.
And many people, although they don't go quite that far, they're halfway there. They got one foot in solipsism and one foot in Christianity.
Yeah.
And they live as if they were the only being.
Right.
This is not to put anyone down. I'm more selfish than the rest of them combined, but it's just our human nature, our fallen human nature. And as you kept insinuating, it's a work in progress. Our humanity is a work in progress. It's not guaranteed, and it's not achieved once and for all.
Society is becoming, I think, unfathomably absurd. But I think a majority of people are not absurd, actually, but rather confused and afraid, and either going along or remaining silent out of fear of being ostracized or even losing their job. This strikes me as tyranny's typical ecosystem. Would you agree? And if so, what is your advice for convincing others and inspiring courage and hope?
It was the philosopher Hannah Arendt who talked about the banality of evil in the Nazi Holocaust. Without getting into the Holocaust itself, just to focus on the banality of evil, I think we can all agree that it is manifest, especially since we lived through the past 3 years, it is manifest that, yes, this is not a fancy pet theory of some academic. This is a reality. This is our fallen human nature. We would rather just go along and let someone else carry the burden of responsibility of swimming against the tide. I'll go with the tide. If there's a government, they're there to take care of us. And if there are experts, they're there to learn truth. And if there's a thing called science, then there are people called scientists. And if there's medicine, there are doctors. And if there's crime, there's the police. And so everything's taken care of, and I don't need to bother with any of that. And I have my little tiny job turning this one little wheel, and I don't need to ask how the cogs interlock and what I'm putting into motion. What am I perpetuating with my little participation in society? I work for IBM. IBM is a good company. I'm not a Nazi because I work for IBM, even though IBM has a history of working with the Nazis. So we can always distance ourselves from the ugly, brutal machinery of death and carnage and perversion and war. The war in Ukraine and it's taking place right now. How many people are contributing to the horror that's being unleashed on the innocent people of that region? And they sleep perfectly well at night because of the banality of evil. So that's my response. It's the willingness to say, well, I'm not going to wear any clothing that was produced in a sweatshop. Well, you're going to be naked, or you're going to be in the woods trying to stitch together leaves from the trees. So there is an argument to be made that, well, let's be reasonable. Let's not set the standards too high and be holier than thou with your veganism and your no leather and no sweatshops and these sorts of things. But from one extreme to the other, in between, there is a just middle way where we can have a certain amount of tolerance for intolerance, but it can't become monstrous and it can't justify the unjustifiable. Like if my friend's a blatant racist or a homophobe or whatever, I will tolerate that to a certain extent, but I have a responsibility as a human being, as a Christian, to step in when it's appropriate, and that's going to require not a rule book. The rule book will only give me general guidelines. What I need to do is be in touch with myself and in touch with my God, so that it's like, no, I have to say something. I have to step in. I have to intervene. You have to be sensitive to that. It's like we are, the world's a stage and we're players, we're actors on the stage, but we have a role to play. And there is a great director in the sky, and you do have responsibilities. So that's how I see it. It's not one extreme or the other, but we have to be sensitive to the fact that at a certain moment, at a certain time, we may have to intervene, we may have to put our neck out, and we may have to put our job on the line, put our money on the line, and all these sorts of things. When it comes to the past 3 years, what we lived through, I'm low on the totem pole by every metric, so I didn't have a lot to put on the line. I don't have a lot to lose, and therefore I can summon up what may look like courage or some sort of rebellious anti-establishment sentiments, but it's just because I don't have a lot on the line. I don't have much to lose in the first place. But there are people that do have a lot at stake, and they have stood up against tyranny. And we won't go into detail so I can keep my YouTube channel. But I think everyone knows what I'm talking about. There are people that have really paid a big price. I haven't.
That's excellent, because I see it the same way too. I see myself quite fortunate and blessed through just dumb luck. So we have to have sympathy for those that do have a whole lot to lose and families to raise. So within that context, we can really see clearly those that do stand out as courageous warriors. And there's always examples in the wars, in Nazi Germany, in Bolshevik Russia, of people that really put themselves on the line and made a difference and helped to write the true history of what went on and paid a huge price for it. The position that we're in now, when I look at young people, especially, because they really go after the young. They're indoctrinating the young in our schools and our universities. These people don't have a lot to lose. In fact, they're losing a lot by just going to university and going into debt to get indoctrinated, and they can easily jump ship and close off that infinite debt siphon and be free and think for themselves if they wanted to. But they're under so much peer pressure. What they have to lose is much more sort of social rather and psychological rather than monetary. So I think about the young people and how to encourage them in basic principles, I think that are proven to be the case. Like I was saying about slogans that sort of drop out of the sky and they're on everyone's lips all of a sudden, to sort of remind people that whenever that happens, be suspicious. Don't jump on the bandwagon. Don't succumb to peer pressure. What do we do when we raise kids well? You know, they go to school and they're pressured this way and that, or they're bullied. I think if we're connected to Christian wisdom, we give them the tools of courage and integrity, not the opposite. You know, again, we've forgotten the basic Christian wisdom. How do you resist evil? Well, first of all, you don't resist it boldly. Who do you think you are? Have you forgotten that Satan is the most intelligent foe you can imagine? The father of lies. You're going to go kick him in the shin? You're done. It doesn't work that way. But how does one deal with evil or any form of untruth or injustice? Is to cultivate truth and justice in yourself, to grow a skin and to be tough, to be brave, and to be the example, to stand in truth. When you lose the practice of solitude, the distance and detachment that's required to hold on to your being and to your integrity is a terrible thing. You have to hold on to that. You have to have the courage to step out of the crowd. When the crowd is going this way, hold out. Step out of the crowd. Look at it from a distance. Ask yourself, do I agree with this? Because 9 times out of 10, the crowd is always wrong. The walk with God is a solitary walk. And it would not have come to the state that it is now if we had better nurtured children that grow up to be brave and integrated souls. But here we are. But like I said, within that question, my feeling that the most absurd voices, I think, are the minority, and they have the biggest megaphone. And in my experience, most people don't really drink the Kool-Aid 100%, but they're more focused on being nice and not making waves and not sowing more division as they see it, as we talked about earlier. So along comes someone who stands up, say in a school board meeting or on the political stage, like Jordan Peterson, and there's lots of people that have no understanding of him at all. I liken the hatred of Jordan Peterson to the anti-Trump hysteria. A lot of it is rumor, and a lot of people just don't look into it for themselves. But the reason why Trump was so popular, the reason why Jordan Peterson is so popular, is because there are a lot of young people, okay, that hear him say things that were already burning in their heart, but they were too cowardly to say it, or they were too uneducated or inexperienced to articulate it. And they're alone, and there's very few people that can openly talk to without being judged, and so they stew alone, thinking they're crazy. And then along comes someone who articulates exactly what's in their heart, and they recognize it right away, and they say, aha, I'm not so crazy after all. And it inspires courage. And it's mostly effective on the young people that are in this this cocoon in university, feeling quite uncomfortable, just like I did when I was in university. And this is before it got really wacky. It wasn't nearly as bad in the 80s. But my peers in school and the stuff they were teaching in school, there was something about so much of it that was, as you said earlier, missing the point. And it took a while to find out exactly what that point it was missing. Okay. Now I believe that I'm a typical example. I think that there are untold thousands of students at the age of 18 and up in universities that are feeling exactly what I felt. And And now that I've been through it, and I'm grateful for those people in my life that steered me through it, I want to do my part, and I want to help young people be brave. So many people think, well, don't bring that up now. It's a very sensitive issue, or the truth can wait. Like, it's just ride the storm because it's very volatile and stuff. Bullshit. There's so many young people that are hungry for guidance. They're so hungry for someone who's bold enough to say what's not being said. There's no reason why you can't talk to people that are so drawn into these ideologies when they're young. And Jordan Peterson proved it. Okay, he's converted a lot of people. He's saved a lot of people. He's absolutely not without his flaws, and God knows Trump is not without his flaws. Corruption is probably settling into Jordan Peterson with all this fame. He's slipped up many times. Trump, of course, is a corrupt businessman. This is not to endorse these people. But what I keep trying to tell people is it's so important when there's any kind of phenomena happening in the world, suddenly so-and-so is hugely popular. Now, how immature is this to join a hate bandwagon when hundreds of thousands of people are on their side, on Trump's side or Peterson's side? Something's going on here. Can we get a little detachment here and just step back and not get so personally involved and just say, whoa, something's going on here. What is it? What is the essence of what's going on? Maybe there's some truth in there and some mirror, actually, a useful mirror that's being held up to you that you can learn from. It doesn't mean you agree with Trump or Jordan Peterson or join a bandwagon. What it means is you have the courage and the maturity to examine what is going on here, because things like that do not happen without a reason. There is a soil out of which this grew, and if you don't understand the soil of it, the history of it, the circumstances that led to it, and you just join a hate bandwagon and then confuse that for righteousness, boy, oh boy, this strikes me as the opposite of wisdom. Mm-hmm. So
I'm thinking about The Wizard of Oz. You've seen the movie, I'm sure.
Yeah, of course, many times.
Many times. One of my favorite movies. Yeah. When Dorothy killed the Wicked Witch, all of her minions were grateful and they were liberated.
That's
right. That gives you an indication of the ratio of satanic leaders versus quasi-innocent followers, or just what you, in your question, you framed it, that they themselves are not anti-God or absurd, or however you phrased it, but they're compromised in other ways.
Yes.
And so this is why in war we often kill the general or the head of the snake, or however you want to phrase it. Mm-hmm. There is a reason. And when I look at the populist movements around the world, whether it's Bolsonaro in Brazil or Trump here or whatever, I myself understand perfectly well that I'm not the head of the populist movement, but these people have arisen, God knows why. Yeah. Maybe God has chosen them, or maybe not. But there are people who spark the imagination of the masses, and the masses can then get excited and get some populist movement going. And I'm not endorsing everything in every populist movement, obviously, but I am for the everyday man. I am for the little guy, and I'm not for any sort of greedy, godless, hateful, selfish individuals or organizations that have a lot of money and power. I'm not cheering for them. I'm cheering for the wholesome families and the hardworking people. Those who have some modicum of modesty and dignity and principles and all the rest. But I am first to admit that I'm a follower in that regard. Like, I was excited about Trump because of his character, but because
I love his character,
but because of the charisma by which he excited the regular folk. I do like him as a person. I do like him, and I have differences with him, philosophical differences, obviously. But I do like him. I do like his character.
But getting back to the sheer spectacle of political personality, rather than actually looking deep into it, the people that are on the Orange Man Bad Brigade are focused on his personality and what they're told to think about his personality. But I would say that when you look at him, like for instance, when the media quotes him as allegedly saying, we could inject household cleaner to kill the virus or something, and the media pounces on this, and everyone thinks he's the stupidest man on earth and quite dangerous. We're in the information age, folks. We have YouTube. Well, what do I do when I see a little soundbite and a little thing that they just sort of frame and they put on the media, part of a 20-minute press briefing, and they show 30 seconds that make him look like a fool? Well, it's so easy. Go on YouTube and watch the whole damn 20 minutes, which I did often. Every time I heard someone accuse him of racism or some form of stupidity or rudeness, and I saw the little blip, the little 10-second thing that they showed on the media, I go to the source and I watch the whole press conference or the whole speech from beginning to end, and I see the context, and I come away amazed. It's like, really? You fell for that? All you had to do was look into it for yourself and put it in context. And look at all the good things that he's saying. And look at how he can shoot from the hip, unscripted, without a teleprompter, for hour-and-a-half rallies. The guy can communicate. That alone, no matter what you think of him, no matter what ideas you have in your head, you try doing that. And when's the last time we had a politician that could do that? That speaks from the hip, extemporaneously, for an hour and a half. Or the UN speech that he gave. I watched the whole thing. Oh yeah, he's unpresidential, my ass. Look at the UN speech that he gave towards the end of his term. It's about as presidential as you can get. And everything he said was common sense. Everything he said was sharp, bold truth, but said elegantly and diplomatically and manly enough to sort of show these people who's boss of America, and his vision of cooling the heat between North Korea and Russia, for the right for countries to defend their vital interests and to mutually respect, nation to nation, each other's interests, and to negotiate, and standing up against the globalist mentality and articulating it very clearly. No stumbling, no ums and ahs, no phoniness from him. It was an impeccable speech. Did anyone watch that for themselves? Now, of course, now listen, it has to be, again, emphasized. It might all be a lie. He might be totally in the pocket of the globalists, or not. Everything he said might have been a lie. I grant it. It's possible. But listen to him perform, and listen to what he said, and the kind of message it sends to other countries. Does it sow war, or does it sow peace? Well, and Obama gets the Nobel Peace Prize before he's even president? Was it? Or in his first month or something, just because of these phony words that he said, and he gets the Peace Prize. And under his watch, Libya, Syria, Yemen, on and on. Unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
Are you cheering for Trump 2024, or is his ship sailed?
The options are grim. The options are extraordinarily grim.
Yeah.
But I do think that Trump would be the man for the job. You know,
he's not too old.
No, well, if he is old, how old is he?
I don't know, but he looks a bit tired.
Yeah, well, you still can hear him speak. He's speaking out, and he's quite active, and he's about 1,000 times more articulate and coherent than Joe Biden. So I don't care what age he is, as long as he's functioning at a much higher level. So...
What about the Project Lightspeed? Did that turn you off?
What's that?
he accelerated the vaccine testing.
Okay, well, no. Again, there's an example of I'm not a fan of anyone. There's no heroes in my life. I take the good from the bad, and that's it. That's all. But he's the one that financed and helped fast track the big pharmaceuticals to push this highly questionable jab on the world. And that is something I have not yet heard him repent of. It's not that I trust him unconditionally by a long shot, but what I am saying is that given the options, I know that whether he was naive or totally corrupt and in the pockets of these big companies, the latter being the most likely, what I do know is that I think he's truly sincere about maintaining the integrity of America. And I think he is quite sincere about standing up to the globalists.
I can tell you he's been consistent. I've been watching him for years on The Apprentice before he ran. And he's nothing if he's not consistent. He's very consistent. He may make pragmatic shifts of policy. Who doesn't? Who doesn't? You have to. I mean, you as a parent will make pragmatic shifts of policy from day to day with your child, okay, or with your mother of your child. So that's just par for the course. Every human has to do that. We're not robots. So, but in terms of his attitude, he wants America first. He wants America to thrive, and he wants America to get a good deal, not a bad deal, every time. That's always been his mantra, and I believe him. I believe him 100%. I don't necessarily believe that he's a devout, committed Christian. I don't necessarily believe that he's anti-abortion. But my love for him, my respect for him, is his uniqueness, his authenticity, warts and all, whether you like it or you don't, and his anti-establishment edge and his middle finger to the big boys. And as you and I both know, he may be playing ball with the big boys at different levels, and we don't know, and how much of that is 5D chess, and how much of it is just putting himself first or whatever. But the bottom line is he's the most exciting politician or non-politician that I've ever experienced in my life. He's my favorite so-called politician. Warts and all, and with all the provisos and disclaimers that you and I probably would agree on. But he does shoot from the hip, as you said, and almost more important than that is the ability to inspire a populist uprising. And again, I'm not saying that these populist uprisings are the solution. I'm saying that it's exciting. That's what I'm saying. It's exciting. And it reminds me that I'm not alone. I'm not crazy. And that the little people all want truth and justice and fairness and to be able to have a living wage and to have infrastructure and all just the basic stuff, so they can have a life and not be crushed under the boot of tyranny. Right?
And another thing I would say is that one of the most important roles of a national leader, especially President of the United States with its international standing, one of the most important roles of a good president is to inspire courage and to defend timeless values, foundational values, and that's what he does. Whether it's sincere or not, it doesn't matter. The effect is what's most important. And he's standing up for the integrity and sovereignty of the family. He's standing up for Christian values. Never mind if he's a Christian. The effect is what's important. It's inspiring others to be courageous and to boldly stand their ground in what is valuable. And the idea of bringing industry back home and for, upholding the Constitution and the laws and the customs and the values of traditional America. What is wrong with that? And look at what we have now, and everyone's mum about it. Like, don't you see what you've caused here? You hated him so much that I'm not convinced that many people are fully cognizant, or maybe they're too proud to admit, to see just how bad and disastrous the current administration really is. And naturally, they're going to be embarrassed. It's like they caused this.
Imagine the Trump term where he wasn't fighting the swamp, fighting the deep state. If he had his energy directed to doing the good that he had in mind, rather than 20% of his energy going to that and 80% going to putting out fires that were caused by those who were sabotaging his regime. I mean, he did so much that is good, and we can only imagine if left to his own devices how much more good he could have done. And I think he deserved
that alone.
A second term.
Well, I agree, and that alone is one of the biggest triumphs. You don't have to agree with him, but any sensible person has to respect the magnitude of opposition. Worldwide media, half of the country, 24/7. What he was up against and how well he kept his cool and his nerve and consistency. How can you not respect that? Or maybe you're jealous because you're all such wimps and cowards. You know, I don't know.
It's amazing. It is amazing. It is amazing. It's of biblical proportions. It's of biblical proportions.
It is.
You've heard of King Cyrus and how God appointed him to restore the Jews and these sorts of things. There are many, many people that came to God because of Trump. Yeah. And, you know, it is sad. It is sad watching how we've gone back. You know, we took maybe half a step forward and 3 steps back or whatever. Now it's... it doesn't look good. It looks like the bad guys are winning and they've got it cinched and clinched. But we don't know. It's I always think of it in terms of the mystical, and God has a plan, even with human affairs and politics. Yeah. And if you read the Old Testament, it's not pretty. It's a lot of bloodshed. There's deception. There's intrigue, greed, lust.
Nothing new under the sun.
It's a hot mess. It's always going to continue to be a hot mess. But let's acknowledge, like you said, let's call a spade and acknowledge the miraculous when it's performed in front of our very eyes. Yeah. We do live in unprecedented historical times. And 2016, I remember the night of the election, and I remember being astonished, and I'm still astonished to this day, that he won. And we shouldn't be too surprised that they put all of their eggs in one basket, which was to get rid of him. Yeah. They just had one goal in mind, and there were no holds barred. There is, like I said at the outset of this discussion today, the godless materialist will justify the means to get to their ends. One of the fatal flaws of materialism is you can justify anything. Yeah. And therefore, you can have any means that are at your disposal, because what you want, you want. Ironically, it's the tyranny that they claim to hate. It's the fascism that they claim to oppose. Yeah. And they are enslaved to a cruel tyrant, a cruel slave master, the cruel slavery of Satan. And it would be so much better for them and so much more pleasant to exchange that slavery for slavery to Christ. And imagine how the family would thrive and the nation would thrive. And if everyone in the whole world would break the bonds to Satan, just imagine how we could feed the hungry. You know, we'd have a different perspective if we had God front and center. We'd have a different perspective on
Absolutely.
So any closing thought to wrap up, or tie all of that together? That's a hard one to...
Well, we talked about the worldwide deception and the fragmentation of the human psyche under materialism and all its offshoots and all its various bad fruits that are coming into play. The importance of holding on to the transcendental ideals and the broader principles, to discern the world, to be alone with God, to converse and involve yourself in the world from the safe haven of your own garden and solitude and meditation on God, to be not swayed by the world, and the importance of older people like us to communicate with the young and encourage them. They're hungry, they're confused, and they're not all volatile. I think it's an illusion propagated by the media and social media. But the more insane voices, I think, are the minority with the biggest megaphone, and we shouldn't be dissuaded by that. So, and the point is not, of course, to save the world. That's what the insanity of our world is all about, and it's leading to disastrous results. The point is to save souls, to encourage people, young people especially. This is a spiritual battle, as you said, and we are thinking of the larger reality and the life after this physical body. And the most important thing in life is not the condition of the world, but the condition of your being. And that's the best we can do, is to get our house in order and to hopefully be agents and channels of peace and sanity in our relations. That's all we can do, and that's all we should do, and that's all we ever should have ever been doing. That's one thing that's constant and does not change with time. So, here we go. Amen.
Amen.